It had about 50 or 60 stuffed toys, and it's a picture of these bears. And the reason for the laminated picture, if those bears weren't put back in the right order by the maids, he would shout and scream.
The royal family's gilded facade has often hidden secrets that outsiders could only dream of uncovering. Until now. A former Buckingham Palace maid has come forward, unveiling shocking claims about Prince Andrew in a tell-all interview with The Sun. From eyebrow-raising behavior to royal protocols bent behind closed doors, these revelations paint a different picture of life within the palace walls. But what explosive truths could her insider knowledge hold? Let's dive into the secrets that rocked the monarchy. Life in the royal household. Life in Buckingham Palace would, to anyone who dreamed of marble and gilt, historical grandeur, and that rare opportunity to observe near royalty, be the stuff of which dreams are made. To those whose job it was to put this veneer of perfection, however, reality was far from that. Behind all the glamour, the palace was, according to the former maid, a pressure cooker of strict rules and unending demands, bound together by an unwritten code of silence. Each day kicked off with exacting thoroughness, staff busying themselves in fine preparations for royals that tolerated nothing wrong. It wasn't just a job, she described, it was a performance, and every task from laying the table to fluffing pillows had to meet an impossibly high standard. Of course, behind the glitter were bits and pieces that kept on scraping the veneer of perfectness. With experiences to tell of staff going to incredible lengths for even the most ridiculous things, ironing shoelaces, placing a particular teddy bear just so, never knowing exactly what would be needed at what time. It was as if perfection wasn't good enough, she related, even though they tried as diligently as possible. Acknowledgement and gratitude were few. She lived within a strongly controlled household in which, as time wore on, the guilt showed more and more of the lead. But one figure preempted that role of rupture, the always unpredictable presence of Prince Andrew. According to the maid who described him, he was aloof, entitled, a man who hardly ever noticed those moving around and working behind his back. You could walk past him and feel invisible, she said, remembering the times that his lack of basic courtesy stuck in her mind. It wasn't a hassle-free job. Coupled with the unending workload, there was almost an air of palpable secrecy. The employees were to ensure that whatever they saw in the palace didn't leave it. We were like shadows, she explained, hinting at the continuous follow-throughs and unsaid fears overstepping her boundary. Yet working her way further into the household, she says there's something with the behavior that makes her question it all, even of Prince Andrew. One incident stood out. A late-night request from the prince raised eyebrows among the staff, not just for its timing but for the sheer audacity of the demand. Without detailing this particular moment, the maid hinted that this epitomized the power dynamic within the household. It wasn't a question of privilege, it was something else entirely, she said, leaving her audience to wonder just how far this imbalance of power extended. Yet all that was great and historic about Buckingham Palace couldn't really outshine its dark corners. Isolation came hand in hand with working within the household. It wasn't encouraged to make really good friends with others on staff. A lack of trust became almost tangible and a situation hardly manageable. Conversations were controlled. Relationships were under scrutiny. The tiniest slip would lead to your doom. For the maid, such pressure to conform was unyielding, and it made it impossible for her to ignore the fault lines beneath the surface. Yet, not all was quite so glorious behind these gilded doors as might have been supposed, she reflected. While the rest of the world continued to stare at the luster of this royal family, those operating within its orbit knew full well that reality lay many layers beyond. The inside glimpse at the palace's inner working raised questions for her not just of the image, but of the very institution. What more might her story reveal about the life behind the walls of Buckingham Palace? As the interview dug deeper, the revelations would only be more shocking, exposing a side of the royals that the public was never meant to see. Stay tuned as we explore the claims that shook the monarchy. The claims that shook the monarchy. The world is allowed to see very little of the inner working of the royal family. smiling faces on the balcony, shining speeches and choreographed grace. But the revelations by this former maid are a sure sign that the truth lies much further from where it appears to be. Exposed in the sun, her allegations did more than rattle teacups in Buckingham Palace. They shook the very foundations of the institution called monarchy. Now, what exactly has she said that has the wolves out? Taken all together, the Maid's candid account now painted a damning picture of Prince Andrew, not as some sort of misunderstood royal, but as a figure of unbridled privilege and startling arrogance. One claim described his frequent tantrums over the smallest inconveniences. If something wasn't exactly as he liked it, you knew it, she recalled, remembering how he would get irate with staff when things were not done properly. From the wrong temperature of his morning tea to unpolished shoes not meeting his expectations, these demands set by the prince were more of an endurance test than requests. She didn't even stop at his personality. She went on to explain how indulgence toward him had set the backdrop for bad practices, making the employees bound to show blind eyes towards questionable conducts, telling improper jokes, holding noisy parties that run late, and forgetting about basic courtesy. He was the kind of man who could turn a room cold, she remembered. This may be a far cry from the smiling royal in the picture during public engagements, but disturbingly close to the character analyses that have previously come from those close to him. The former maid didn't mince her words on the culture of silence within the household. Whatever happened, employees were to say nothing. You learned quickly, see nothing, hear nothing, say nothing, she said. This was an unwritten rule for survival, and it was contractual. Anyone who might have spoken out was threatened with legal action, social ostracism, or professional ruin. This was the code of silence that protected not just Prince Andrew but the entire institution, allowing predatory behaviors to fester unchecked. The most salacious of her revelations was the incident with a guest whose name was not mentioned. According to the maid, Andrew's behavior with this man was beyond disrespectful, making the rest of the staff uncomfortable. When asked about it later, she was told to forget it ever happened. But was this just another grievance from a disillusioned employee, or is there more to the story? Her testimony alludes to deep-rooted problems within the palace, where the dynamics of power silenced voices and condoned improper conduct. What makes these allegations even more damning is how they align with the already tarnished public image of Andrew. Whispers of his behavior within the palace compound, growing louder, form a worrying backdrop to the larger scandals that have plagued his name. These are not mere complaints from one disgruntled former maid, but part of a greater pattern that raises some unsettling questions about accountability among those in power. The courage of this maid in speaking out might encourage others to share their stories, but it certainly opens a chilling prospect. How much more are we not being told about what happens behind palace walls? Is this an iceberg whose tips have merely been scratched? Or is the tip the only visible part of an enormous block of ice? The more we begin to probe into the public controversies of Prince Andrew, the web of intrigue only deepens. Prince Andrew's public troubles. Where the name Prince Andrew is thrown into a conversation, scandal is usually not far behind. Indeed, his good name has been consistently dogged by scandals that have captured worldwide attention for years. From poor friendships to disastrous interviews, the public image of the Duke of York has been repeatedly marred. And now, with the former maid's allegations casting new shadows, it's worth examining how these scandals connect to paint a broader picture of the man behind the titles. One of Andrew's most notorious scandals has been his connection with the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, whose ties with the elite shook high society to its core. The friendship was hardly casual. The prince flew on Epstein's private jet, attended parties in his mansions, and even stayed at his New York townhouse when he had already been convicted. The infamous picture of him with the then-teenager Virginia Giuffre, the accuser, in an incident of sexual assault became synonymous with the scandal. To date, Andrew has continually denied the allegations, but his defensive denial and lack of remorse during the infamous BBC Newsnight interview have only done little to dissipate public outrage. The maid's testimony appears to echo the entitlement and arrogance Andrew displayed during his interview. Her claims of his dismissive treatment of staff and penchant for indulging whims without regard for others add weight to the narrative of a man unaccustomed to accountability. It's not hard to see the parallels. A prince who, whether in public or private, has repeatedly behaved as though rules were optional. But Epstein wasn't the only scandal to rock Andrew's image. His high-rolling lifestyle, in part courtesy of questionable business dealings, has raised eyebrows. Reports of questionable financial ties and allegations of accepting gifts from foreign figures have only deepened perceptions that Andrew exists in a bubble of privilege and impunity. Critics argue these are just more examples of a pattern where he exploits his position for personal gain. Her testimony also brought out the involvement of the palace itself in shielding Andrew from scrutiny. Staff were discouraged from showing concern, with even serious allegations treated as no big deal. A culture of silence only serves to protect and embolden men like Andrew. Why change when there are absolutely no consequences? The connections between these scandals and the maid's revelations are both chilling and telling. The picture that emerges is not of isolated incidents, but of a pattern. A prince who repeatedly tests boundaries and an institution that allows it. Andrew's public troubles and the maid's private accounts converge to form a damning narrative of entitlement, impunity, and a failure to uphold the values the monarchy claims to represent. These allegations keep popping up, and it places the royal family in an increasingly difficult position. How can they distance themselves from a man whose actions have tainted their image so? More importantly, how will they rebuild trust with the public when such stories keep surfacing? The dots between private indiscretions and public scandals are connecting in ways more chilling than we could have imagined. Could the maid's revelations be the final nail in the coffin of Andrew's reputation, or is this just the beginning of an unraveling tale? Maybe the next revelations will hold answers we are not prepared to hear. Stay tuned for more truths behind the headlines. Why everyone is talking about the maid's shocking revelations. The story broke with the force of a thunderclap, shaking the hallowed grounds of royal reverence. When the Sun finally revealed her claims, it was no ripple that the former maid had caused. Rather, it was to spark off a media frenzy sweeping across headlines, talk shows, and social media platforms. The British tabloids, notorious for their voracious appetite for royal scandals, were quick to seize upon this explosive story. But where the surface seemed a further round of gossip, the underlying consequences were far more serious. The Sun framed the story with a mix of intrigue and urgency, making sure it was not one that would get missed. The carefully crafted headlines trumpeted the most salacious detail. Phrases like royal outrage and behind the palace curtains turned this into a must-read saga. Coming out in a period when institutional trust has taken a hit from all sides, this exposé felt like another nail in the coffin for the monarchy's untouchable image. But how did the public respond to these revelations? Social media, as usual, became an opinion battlefield. While some of the readers looked at the account provided by the maid as a disgruntled employee seeking attention, many of them quickly connected her claims to a broader set of public controversies surrounding Prince Andrew. #Royal Scandal and #Prince Andrew were trending on hashtags for days, with pretty heated debates about whether it was worth continuing the funding of the monarchy by taxpayers. Memes, parodies, and incendiary opinion pieces followed, setting up an environment in which even staunch royalists began to question the integrity of the institution. And then, of course, came the whispers of conspiracy. The timing of the maid's revelations was no coincidence, mused some media and commentators. Was this a coordinated effort to deflect from other royal controversies, or perhaps a deliberate attempt to push Andrew further into obscurity? These questions added fuel to an already raging fire, keeping the story alive in the news cycle far longer than the palace would have liked. While the press picked apart every aspect of the maid's claims, the royals took up their typical stance, one of silence. The PR machine at Buckingham Palace swung into overdrive with a short statement that neither confirmed nor denied the allegations. "We do not comment on individual staff matters," it read, the line so standard it bordered on robotic. But this non-response only served to whet the appetite of the public. Why wasn't the palace more forceful in defense of one of its own? Was their silence complicity? Or was it just a calculating PR move to not draw any more attention to the scandal? In contrast to the volume of public opinion swirled around them, the lack of a direct rebuttal by the royal family was deafening. It wasn't just the accusations of a maid that were in question. It was the whole structure of an institution that seemed more interested in protecting its image than actually addressing any wrongdoing. Was this silence based on fear, strategy, or indifference? These residual doubts started to tear at the already fragile reputation of the monarchy, and this was no media scandal. The revelations by the Maid did not stop at pointing a finger at Prince Andrew, but showed up the cracks in the entire royal system. With each headline, a little more of the mystique of the British monarchy unraveled. How much longer could they keep up an air of grandeur amidst a growing pile of scandals? Fallout from this story suggests maybe not that long. The real ramifications of this media mayhem have yet to be realized. But one thing is for sure, this is not a story that will quietly fade into the background. As more people begin to question the relevance and accountability of the monarchy, the once untouchable institution finds itself at an unprecedented crossroads. Might this be the beginning of the end of their gilded legacy, or is there still a way for them to regain public trust? The secrets they didn't want you to know about royal protocol. Behind all that pomp, pageantry, and perfectly polished smiles lies a world of rules. Rules so labyrinthine, so rigid, a military operation could virtually come across as relaxed, an exercise in slackness. The presentation of royal protocol usually comes across as if the backbone of the monarchy, devised to keep alive dignity and tradition. Still, if the Maid's revelations were anything to go by, perhaps it serves as some smokescreen, hiding secrets behind gilded walls the way Buckingham Palace does. Living by royal protocol is not an easy thing. Every gesture, every word, and even every glance is choreographed to present an image of grace and control. Even the order in which tea should be poured, the manner of bowing, and the degree of a curtsy are all dictated by such rules for every human being in the orbit of the royal family. But while seeking to preserve the image of the monarchy, these protocols also make life suffocating for the staff. The Maid described the royal household as a place where individuality went to die at the altar of tradition. "You were there to serve and not question," she furthered. It is a system predicated on confidentiality agreements. Everyone in the royal staff signs comprehensive, non-disclosure agreements, making sure the secrets of the palace remain just that, secrets. These agreements cover not only official matters but even personal behaviors that could be used to scrutinize the royals in public. It is a system that speaks volumes for the benefit of the powerful, while silencing those who would otherwise tell the truth. Her story rebukes the glittery veneer of life as it really is. The place she describes, full of tension and silent rules, seems so far away from what people consider the monarchy to be. She pointed to those moments when staff were compelled to turn a blind eye to behaviors that would, in any other context, raise some very serious concerns. "We knew better than to ask questions," she says, painting a picture of an environment where often the trumping of morality is done through loyalty. Other insider accounts support her. Over the years, former palace staff have suggested that working within the royal system is fraught with challenges, a culture that demands perfection, yet offers little support in return. One former chef remembered being berated for using the wrong type of egg for a royal breakfast. Another spoke of the psychological toll of working long hours with little recognition. These stories indicate that it is not an isolated incident of the Maid, but a part of the larger pattern. What's most troubling, though, is how royal protocol is used to shield personal behaviors that contradict the monarchy's values. While the public sees a family devoted to service, Insiders see a system designed to protect its own, no matter the cost. The rigid adherence to protocol creates a power dynamic where staff are discouraged from speaking out even when they witness wrongdoing. What else might be behind these closely guarded walls? If the revelations of this maid are any indication, there's a lot more to the story than what has been led to believe. As insider accounts continue to surface, the carefully constructed image of the British monarchy begins to crumble. Might this be the beginning of a broader reckoning for an institution that has long operated in the shadows? The juxtaposition of the strictness of royal protocol and personal secrets underscores the monarchy's greatest paradox: an institution dependent upon tradition for its strength, yet seemingly unable to keep up with modern times regarding demands for accountability. And as the public asks for more openness, the question lingers: will the royals rise to the occasion, or will their secrets be their undoing? Could this spark an inquiry? But when the former maid finally came forward with her bombshell allegations, one pressing question seemed to arise. Could her allegations have any legal consequences? For a family steeped in centuries-old tradition, where scandals are often swept under the rug, the prospect of a formal inquiry could be seismic. But as history has often shown, taking legal action against powerful individuals, especially royals, is no simple task. Although these claims from the Maid are not about any overtly criminal elements, they add to the stack of controversies that may require the need for formal investigations. Her statements, if confirmed, could bring to light a culture of misconduct, exploitation, or negligence behind palace doors. But could they ever translate into legal action? Much would depend on several factors, including if and when more staff come forward and what public pressure is placed upon authorities to act. Prince Andrew has been no stranger to legal troubles. Of course, his name was already tainted in association with Jeffrey Epstein, a scandal that led to one of the most publicized legal battles of the decade. Now infamous was his settlement with Virginia Giuffre, who accused him of sexual assault when she was a minor, a defining moment in his troubled legacy. While the settlement prevented a trial, it left many questions regarding his actions and to what extent he was involved in the criminal activities of Epstein. Would the new allegations once again bring about public and legal scrutiny? Historically, the British monarchy has been above the fray when it comes to public accountability, wrapped in layers of tradition, protocol, and privilege. Where politicians and other public figures have to face inquiries or resign, royals have enjoyed an immunity that is both literal and figurative. But times are changing. As the mood shifts toward greater transparency and equality, the idea that royals cannot be scrutinized simply because of who they are will be less tolerated. But the road to justice is paved with obstacles, as can be expected when the mighty are involved. For any action to be taken against a royal, there needs to be significant proof, continuous public outcry, and often even the courage of insiders to risk it all by becoming whistleblowers. The problem is, there are non-disclosure agreements, financial settlements, and high-powered legal teams for the monarchy. She may well also see her own credibility questioned and her motives scrutinized in ways that take away from her allegations. The possibility of a wider inquiry is not entirely ruled out, however. Such a move could be compelled if there is a louder public outcry or if more insiders come out of the woodwork. This isn't unprecedented. After all, Prince Andrew's association with Epstein did bring about great legal and media scrutiny. The real challenge lies in keeping the momentum. Such scandals, which might be at the front-page headlines, get forgotten quickly with the next big story overriding it. And without sustained attention, any chance of lasting legal impact will be minimal. Another equally important avenue of action would be civil action, if any is taken. Clearly, criminal charges against its members are highly unlikely, but in a civil case there are lower standards of evidence which could conceivably allow some measure of justice for the Maid or other people. Any civil suit has a different set of hurdles, though, especially while taking on what seems like the bottomless resources of an institution like the royalty. So will justice ever actually reach the upper echelons of power? The answer lies not just in how strong the claims of the Maid can be, but in the will of society to take even the most untouchable figures to justice. This could be a point of change, or just one more chapter in the very long history of unresolved controversies concerning royals. What's next for Prince Andrew? Scandal piles on scandal, and one thing is sure: the future of Prince Andrew within the royal circle hangs in the balance. But what's to become of the embattled Duke of York? Will he clear his name and go on with life, or is he a surefire bet to end up a mere also-ran in the annals of the monarchy? In the worst possible timing, allegations arose from the Maid against Prince Andrew. Already reeling from the fallout of the Epstein controversy, these new claims add another layer of damage to his public image. In recent years, Andrew has made sporadic attempts at rehabilitating his reputation, from the carefully curated public appearances to backroom lobbying for a return to royal duties. Yet with each effort, it seems like he's only managing to make things worse, firing on reverse in terms of quietening public scrutiny. The Epstein case marked a turning point for Andrew, who lost all his royal patronages and was made to retreat from public life. An disastrous BBC interview in 2019 merely made things worse, with unconvincing answers and an absence of remorse drawing criticism from all quarters. Since then, he has mostly been relegated to the shadows, making appearances only at carefully controlled family events. Even these appearances, however, have not been without controversy, with many questioning why he continues to enjoy any royal privileges at all. The public feeling about Andrew has dramatically flipped. Once hailed as a war hero and charismatic royal, many now see him as a liability to the monarchy. Continuous polling demonstrates that the majority in Britain believe he should play no role in royal life in a number of ways. That has been loudly magnified by social media, where Andrew is commonly used as some sort of avatar of the monarchy's perceived sense of entitlement and lack of accountability. The revelations from the Maid deepen this divide. To Andrew's skeptics, she provides more evidence that he is unfit for any kind of public role. For the royal loyalists, however, they present a painful dilemma: how to square support for the monarchy with the actions of one of its most controversial members. The palace has been mum about what the future now holds for Andrew. There have been rumors of a soft exile to a private life abroad, but so far unconfirmed. What's clear, however, is that any attempt to reintegrate Andrew into the royal fold would be met with fierce resistance from both the public and within the royal family itself. King Charles III, who has made modernizing the monarchy a central part of his reign, is unlikely to undermine such efforts by giving Andrew a leading role. And yet the question of legacy looms large. Andrew's continued presence, even in a diminished capacity, clouds the whole institution of royalty. For a family which has always thrived by public approbation, his scandals are more than personal failures. They're a menace to the monarchy's very survival into the 21st century. Is this the beginning of the end of Prince Andrew's royal stature? All signs point to a long, slow fade from public life. But even in obscurity, the damage he has done to the monarchy's reputation will linger. The question now is whether the royal family can distance itself enough to repair the trust that has been lost. The story of Andrew is far from over, but one thing is for sure: the days of him enjoying the privileges of royal life without scrutiny are well and truly over. The legacy he leaves behind is not one of service or honor, but of scandal and controversy, a cautionary tale for a monarchy desperately trying to stay relevant in a changing world. Voices of the people. News of the former Maid's allegations saw the world seemingly stop and listen. From royal watchers to staunch critics and supporters, reactions ranged from outrage to staunch defense across social media, tabloids, and opinion pieces. These were not some kind of whispered rumors through the corridors of the palace, but rather a rallying cry for all those who have long questioned its accountability. The Maid's revelations were seen among critics as the last nail in the coffin for a monarchy struggling to show relevance in modern times. Hashtags of calls for transparency and accountability lit up social media, with many referencing Prince Andrew's history of controversy. Public forums, social media platforms such as Twitter and Reddit, turned into battlefields with opinions clashing. Others felt the Maid's allegations were the tip of the iceberg, pointing to deeper issues throughout the royal household. At the same time, however, the royals' advocates have turned more defensive, raising questions regarding the former Maid's veracity, mostly with regard to timing as part of overinflated publicity or the pursuit of big money in court. As far as they are concerned, the institution of the monarchy is not only the essence of the British monarchy. If one individual is attacked within this institution, then that strikes at its very core. Loyalists even admit to the challenge in defending increasingly indefensible controversies linked with Prince Andrew. As the dust settles from this latest controversy, the royal family faces an uphill battle in the struggle to regain public trust. The question isn't just about Prince Andrew, it's about the institution in its entirety. Is the monarchy able to change and move with the times, or will it be eclipsed by the scandals of its members? The former Maid's revelations have cast a long shadow over the royal family, challenging its image of dignity and decorum. But the real impact lies in what these allegations represent, a crack in the facade of secrecy that has shielded the monarchy for centuries. As more insiders find the courage to speak out, will the royal family be forced to change, or will its walls of silence hold firm? What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We're eager to hear your take on this unfolding story.